Welcome back, Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Now we're going to talk about a question that comes up often in primary classrooms. What role should invented spelling play in the primary classroom? And we have a lot of perspectives on this, but in my experience as a first grade teacher, I use it often to encourage students to not only be confident about what they're writing, but use it as a teaching tool so you can actually analyze what they're writing and see what kind of letter sound correspondences they know and then which ones they need to work on.
So that's interesting. So like an assessment almost.
Right.
So I think invented spelling can be used for different purposes, for encouraging that confidence with writing, for assessment, and maybe to think about how it connects to some of the early reading skills we're talking about in this MOOC.
In your experience, did you ever hear concerns from parents or administrators about letting kids spell things in ways that were non-conventional?
Yes, usually from parents. Didn't really understand why we would allow students to use invented spelling, but once you explain the purpose of it and that they will eventually learn the conventional spellings, sound spelling patterns, letter sound relations, then they were more on board.
Well, I think we can think about this kind of on a continuum. When in students' development of sound spelling patterns and writing and phonological awareness, is it best to use invented spelling to teach them that, or just to encourage them to do it on their own? And we can also think about how can we best support students in using invented spelling.
So like in our other units, we've chosen a study that we think highlights some interesting and promising ideas related to this big question. And this study is by researchers named Willett, Sinishaw, and Haley. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of that study now, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more. This study, which informs our thinking about the important topic of invented spelling, is by Jean Willett and colleagues and was published in 2013 in the Journal of Experimental Education. Just like in Unit 1, we'll use this series of questions to critically read this empirical study. The issue of interest for these researchers is how invented spelling can be used with young elementary students as an instructional tool to support a number of literacy outcomes, including phonological awareness and alphabet knowledge. Previous research shows that children's invented spellings get increasingly more sophisticated and conventionalized as they grow older. In this study, the researchers want to capitalize on children's abilities to create spellings based on what they notice about the sounds in a word. The researchers were also interested in the kind of feedback that teachers provide to young spellers to help them gradually move from invented to more conventional spelling while learning more about letter-sound relationships. The participants in this study were kindergarten children during the second half of their kindergarten school year. This is an experimental comparison in which half of the participants, about 20 children, received one type of instruction and the other half received a different type of instruction. This comparison helps the researchers see how the two approaches compare in effectiveness. In this case, half of the children received instruction that focused on invented spelling, and in the control instruction, students were taught traditional and widely accepted methods of phonological awareness, for example, Elkonin boxes, to help them manipulate sounds in words. Both conditions used the same words and they learned them in the same order. When they compared the groups, they found that both groups grew in their knowledge across the 8 weeks of instruction. However, the children in the invented spelling condition outperformed the other group on a measure of learning to read new words. They also grew more than the other group in the sophistication of their invented spelling, which is not surprising since this is exactly what they were taught. On measures of phonological awareness and letter-sound relationships, both groups improved at similar rates. The researchers interpret these trends as evidence that invented spelling can be a beneficial teaching tool that helps not only with spelling, but also for strengthening phonological awareness, letter-sound knowledge, and word reading. So now if we look and think about the actual instruction they received, the students participated in 16 invented spelling sessions over 8 weeks. Each session lasted about 20 minutes, and it was taught to small groups of 3 to 5 students. There were 40 words that were chosen for instruction, and these words were chosen to represent a variety of important vowel and syllable patterns that children should practice. During the lesson, a word was presented out loud and with a picture, and then the teacher repeated the word with the sounds stretched out. Children were asked to repeat the word and then to write the word as best they could using their letter sound knowledge. Here's where it gets really cool. The instructor then had a quick conversation with each child individually, giving feedback using a Vygotskian approach to invented spelling. I'm sure you remember Vygotsky from previous educational courses you've taken. He was a psychologist who developed important theories about the role of social interaction in learning. In particular, he developed the theory of the zone of proximal development that suggests that children learn best when the instruction is just beyond what they can do alone and when they receive feedback or collaboration that stretches their knowledge just a little bit. So instead of trying to quote unquote correct the child's spelling of the word, the teacher gave feedback that helped the child take one more developmental step beyond their initial invented spelling. For example, if the child correctly identified the initial consonant of the word, the teacher would help them figure out the final consonant sound. If the child correctly spelled the initial and final sounds, the teacher would help the child with the medial vowel sound. Then the cycle would repeat with each word spelled and discussed twice per lesson, and they did 5 words per lesson each day. This is a really helpful starting point for helping us design small group differentiated instruction for young readers who need support in these areas.
That was a really interesting study, and it really got us thinking about a lot of things. For me, it brings up some of those relationships between writing and reading. Again, we often think about invented spelling as part of the writing domain, but it connects to all of these reading skills as well.
And for me, what really stands out is the way the instructors in that study were thinking really developmentally and the kinds of feedback they were giving children. They were trying to provide feedback that was just beyond what they were already able to do independently, so we could really scaffold them towards those conventional spellings, but in a supportive, useful way.
And I think that scaffolding piece is so important for teachers to take the student from where they are and move them a little bit further by just offering those prompts and questions to guide them along.
Yeah, it makes me think also how we might need to individualize for some students, because that type of instruction and supporting invented spelling in kindergarten may be applicable to a lot of students, but some of our students in 2nd or 3rd grade may still need similar supports.
And that would work well with either one-on-one or in small groups.
Right.
For the students that need that.
Absolutely.
So now we'd like to invite you to share your perspectives about inventive spelling. How have you used it in your classroom? What has worked? What have your challenges been? And how have you overcome those challenges?